Well, welcome back to our study of the Book of Esther. Today we pick up in Esther Chapter 2. And we first notice in Esther Chapter 2, which, by the way, if you haven't, pause the video right now, take a break, read the chapter so that you have a little bit of familiarity with what's going on, and then come back and join us. After these things is a reference back to chapter 1, where the king has gotten mad at his queen, or at least she's identified as Queen Vashti, for her refusal to take part in a drunken feast. And here we see the king kind of has cooled his head. He's thought better of the situation, at least in some respects, and says to himself that he needs to have somebody to replace the Queen Vashti, who he has banished and kind of exiled. And we see that it is not the king himself who comes up with this the solution to the situation. It's not even his advisors. It's a group of servants. And we see that the king likes their idea, but it almost comes across as the king really, again, doesn't know what he's doing. King Ahasuerus just kind of rolls with whatever people tell him to do and kind of says, well, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Let's go with it. The idea, of course, is to scour the countryside, scour the kingdom, and find beautiful young girls to collect for his harem. This is not how a Persian king would have chosen a primary queen. The Persian's primary queen, the Persian king's primary queen, would have come from the nobility. It would have been an arranged marriage for political alliances. So we know that he's not replacing a queen. He's rather replacing what we would call in most of the Old Testament a concubine, a secondary wife. He's gathering up a bunch of young girls, probably 12 to 14 range, somewhat young women, especially by our modern standards. They are going to go through a year of beauty treatment before they spend one night with the king, and the king gets to decide kind of whether or not he likes the girl. Depending on how much he likes the girl is where their pecking order in the entire harem is going to be. If he really likes her, she's going to have more clout, more prestige within the collection of women. If he does not like her as much, she's going to have lesser esteem. Part of their social status is going to be determined by how well they please the king. Among those who are taken is this Jewish girl named Hadassah or Esther. We want to notice a few things about Esther. Number one, even though she does have a Jewish name, Hadassah, she is known throughout the book as Esther. Her cousin, who is raising her, is Mordecai. These are not Jewish names. These are names derived from the deities Marduk and Astari. And so these names represent that they have assimilated into Babylonian and now Persian culture. These are Jews who have not returned home. Their names suggest that they are assimilating into the culture. We're going to find out at the end of the chapter that Mordecai hangs around the king's guards and the gate. That means he's got either some position within the palace or he's aspiring to some position in the palace. Either way, he is trying to get a foothold in the politics of the day. So we kind of are clued in right from the beginning that these are not the most observant Jews. The Jews would have been able to have returned home sometime well before this event, 20, 30 years before this event. So the fact that they are hanging around and trying to win favor in the court tells us that they're not the most dedicated to Jewish practice. But this is who we have set up: Mordecai and Esther. Mordecai, we're given his genealogy, and we are told that he is descended from Kish, a Benjamite. Now, this could be just a coincidental thing. We are told that Kish is a Benjamite. The coincidence could be that either this man is just named Kish and from Benjamin, but we've already encountered a Kish from Benjamin, and that was King Saul's father. So that becomes something we have to keep an eye on. It's going to actually play up more in the next chapter when we're introduced to the primary villain of the account. But for now, we're going to kind of lay that aside a little bit. If you want to, you can kind of read about King Saul, because that'll give you some background. And just to tell you, the wording of this chapter is a little ambiguous about who exactly was taken in captivity. Was it Kish, the son of Benjamin, or was it Mordecai himself? Which, if that's the case, he's something like 120 years old. We have to kind of look at the text and see what it's trying to do more than what it's saying. Neither of those, neither of the ideas of who's taken really match up, because a Benjamite, taken in the captivity of 586 when Jerusalem was taken, maybe, but it's not terribly likely. At the same time, Mordecai being taken in captivity, not likely. Rather, what we're seeing here is the text very clearly trying to signal us to look back to the story of Saul. And we're going to develop that more starting in the next video. But for now, just remember that Mordecai is descended from the same lineage as Saul. Now, we have to ask the question, what kind of person is Mordecai? What kind of person is Esther? We already know that the king is a drunken slob who is going to cheer himself up by gathering up young women for his own sexual gratification. We know the king is not necessarily somebody who we would hold up and emulate. Not at all. However, we now have to ask ourselves about Mordecai and Esther. How much choice do they have in the matter? How much choice do they have? How much say do they have in Esther going to the king's house? Do they have a lot of say? Are they terribly complicit? These are questions you have to ask for yourself. There's no real right answer, but ask yourself, how are we supposed to view these two people? Are they just prisoners of their day, where the king has issued an order and now they have to comply? Or are they just pawns in a greater scheme? And your answer might be different for both of them. I recently was listening to a podcast about Marilyn Monroe. It's a history podcast, and I happen to be talking about Marilyn Monroe. And I kind of, when I see Esther, this is somebody who I compare her to. For those of you who might not know, the debate on Marilyn Monroe is, she was obviously taken advantage of for her sexuality. But to what degree was she complicit? To what degree did she play that up? Was she somebody who was just taken advantage of and abused? Or was she somebody who knew what was going on and played it to her advantage? And that's a real question mark. The same is true of Esther. And we're going to see this, that when you look at Esther, you have to really ask yourself, is she just the victim of the systems that are in place? Or is she complicit in furthering those systems? We all recognize that the system that allows the king to go in and take whatever 12-year-old girls he wants to for his harem is not a good system. We know that that's a flawed system. That's wrong and evil. We can very clearly see that. What we have to ask ourselves is, to what degree are these Jews furthering that system? Are they playing along or not? And I ask because we see that after Esther is taken into the harem, we're given some detail about this, that what their treatments were, what their beauty treatments were, and all of this. And we see that Esther very quickly makes friends with the eunuch who's in charge of the entire harem. Now, that is a shrewd political move. That is something that she does of her own initiative. But is it because she's just a friendly, outgoing person, or she knows how to work the system? Obviously, Mordecai knows how to work the system, or is trying to. To what degree is Esther following in that footpath, in those footsteps, that she is trying to finagle the system to her advantage? She's making friends with the one person in there who might be able to truly help her. At the same time, she's hiding any cultural identity that she might have. This is, again, something we have to recognize. Not only do the names conceal the identities of Mordecai and Esther, but now Esther is taking all the steps she can to hide her identity, her origins. She is covering over the fact that she is part of God's people. And we have to really sit with that, because we see in another book written about the same time period, we see Daniel and his friends. We know them best as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are very outspoken for their faith. They are very outspoken that they are Jews. They do not submit to the lavish, luxurious lifestyle that the kings want to put on them. They reject the food. They reject the treatments. Other than the education, they reject everything. Esther willingly accepts it. How are we supposed to recognize her character? How are we supposed to take her? Is she somebody who is rejecting what we would consider to be all of the religious elements of being a Jew? Is she somebody who is trying to hide her identity so that she can get ahead in the world? Very valid question, and something you have to wrestle with, because we need to try to see what the book is telling us. Personally, when I read this, I think Esther and Mordecai are really just playing along with the system. They recognize what the system is, and they play the game. I don't think they're terribly concerned about being Jewish. I think at this point they are trying to be good Persian citizens who make their way in the world without actually being committed in any way to what it means to be Jewish. Esther finally gets her chance after a year to impress the king. She intelligently goes to the chief eunuch and says, "Hey, what can I do to impress this guy?" And he gives her all of the instructions that she needs to know, because obviously she's playing to win. We should recognize that this is this kind of behavior we would find rather repugnant. Esther's going in for a one-night stand with a man who she's never seen, never met, and just going in to play favors. She's trying to move up in the world, and we have to reconcile ourselves to that in some way. Again, it could be she is a complete slave to this system and has no other options, and so she's making the best of it. Or we can look at her and say she's playing along, knowing how to work the system. Either way, she pleases the king very much, so she's given a position of prominence within the harem. She is taken back. We're told that she did a good job at her job, and she is now in a position of favor. Then we get to kind of this tangent, a real tangent from the rest of the story at this point, and that is Mordecai is standing out by the king's guard by the gate at some point. We don't know why he's there. Is he an official there? Is he some sort of tax collector or gatekeeper? Something. Probably, possibly. The text kind of hints that he has a reason to be at the gate. There's some reason to believe that Mordecai is not just hanging around at the gate to keep tabs on Esther. It's that he has some official business. But anyway, he overhears a plot to kill the king. Now, Mordecai could easily have just taken this information to the king, but he decides against it. He decides that instead of taking the information to the king, he's going to take the information to Esther. Now, this is a very shrewd political move, because by taking it to Esther, they both can receive some honor from the king. If Mordecai just goes on his own, he is on his own. He gets some level of accolade, but Esther does not. Now he's going to move her up in the king's eye as well as himself, so that they can both advance and hopefully gain even more prominence. He takes her the information that the king is going to be assassinated. The king finds out that this information is correct. He accepts the information, and he says, "Good job." We see at the close of chapter 2, Esther is in favor with the king. Mordecai is in favor with the king. But nothing really happens other than, the king feasts. The king has banquets. The king is still the king. He doesn't make good decisions. He makes necessary decisions, but he doesn't make good decisions. And he gets drunk. We see that he just does not care. So we're left at the end kind of puzzled as to what's going to happen with Mordecai and Esther. Why on earth are we getting told about this sleazy king who does nothing to help the people, and when people actually help him, he just kind of says, "Good job," and walks away. So that's where we're going to leave it for today, for this video. Join me again for the next one when we discuss Esther chapter 3. Thank you. As always, if you have questions, There's a lot of ways to get in touch with us, to contact me directly. Feel free to ask questions, and I will try to respond to those in future videos. Thanks. Have a blessed day.